Welcome everyone for the third issue of our series, our Animal Matters series in Animals and Art. I'm Alan Rutberg. I'm the director of the Center for Animals and Public Policy. A couple things coming up. One next week on Thursday the 19th, we have our own graduate, Danica Oriel Morway, coming to talk about her work at Foster Parrots and their new feral arts program. Also, for those of you who haven't heard about it, the faculty at the center are offering a summer short course on animals and society, hot topics in human-animal relationships, the last week of June, so June 25th to 29th. So anyone who's interested in that should check our website out. Anyway, I have the pleasure today of welcoming Dr. Lucy Spelman. Dr. Spelman is a board-certified veterinary zoologist, or a board-certified in zoological medicine. She has a long history with zoo medicine, was the first female director of the National Zoo, after serving for a while as a clinical veterinarian there. And after she left the zoo, ran Gorilla Doctors, I guess, for a while in Africa. So she has a long history with zoological medicine and some pretty exciting jobs, some fun kinds of things to do. And after that, she again became more interested in art and is currently on the faculty at the Rhode Island School of Design, RISD, and is teaching undergraduate and graduate students there. About the connection between animals and art, and has also started a nonprofit for which there are buttons and flyers up front, and I'm sure she will talk about that a little bit. So thank you so much for coming, Lucy.
Thank you for inviting me, and it's great to be here. I'm going to start. It's not a lecture. No notes need to be taken, but I'm still going to quiz you a little bit. So I'm showing you the skull of an animal. Now, if you know what this is already, don't say it quite yet. You can probably get some ideas about the type of animal it is. I'll tell you it's a living species. It's an endangered species. What is not endangered now, right? Except maybe humans. So here's a closer up of the skull. It's tied up on the roof of inside a little shack. That's why there's a piece of metal through it. But you're looking at it and you're probably getting the idea that it's not a vegetarian animal. Okay, so if you know what it is, great. This is its favorite prey. And anyone know what this species is? To give a little hint about what the animal is? Capybara, which is the largest rodent on Earth. So where are we if we're looking at capybara? Where do these guys live? Good, okay, South America. So we have some sort of carnivore. It lives in South America, eats capybara. Most of you probably know what animal I'm talking about. Here's an example of its habitat. This is an animal that has a broad range of habitats, but it's going to be hanging out in the bushy areas, so it's not seen during the day, and it's going to be pretty much anywhere it wants to be at night. You can see in the background there are some people. There's a village in the distance. This is actually in Guyana, South America. Where most of my slides today are picturing Guyana. Here is a footprint from now can you tell me, is it a cat family or a dog family? Cat, why is it in the cat family? Because the pads are oval and you can't see the nail. Okay, so even if you don't know what this is, even if you don't know how to track animals, you know what a dog or a cat footprint look like. It's true no matter what species of dog or cat. So anybody know what animal I've been showing? Jaguar. Very good. So about 2 minutes before I took this photo, I didn't see the jaguar. And I should probably have shown you the whole series of photos. They are so amazing in their camouflage. So I've worked in Guyana for almost 25 years doing field work. And I saw my first jaguar 2 years ago, first and only jaguar. Seen lots of footprints. Probably walked by a lot of jaguar, not realizing how close they were. And when I saw this cat, I was in a boat with my friend Oswin, and we were looking for giant otters, and he goes, Jaguar, and I thought he was kidding. And he turned off the motor, and we both looked up, and I mean, she was right above us. And at first I thought, she is going to jump in the boat. And my emotion was, I want her to jump in the boat. I wanted to like hug this cat that is of course capable of like tearing my face apart. But she's just so beautiful. And you can tell from this photo that she just ate. She's eaten something plentiful. So she wasn't going to jump in the boat and eat us. She doesn't want to eat us. She was basically like, you just woke me up from my nap on the bank here. What are you? Okay, you're two people in a boat. I'm used to seeing you. And then we moved on. We got our photo. She looked at us for a while, and then she walked away. So she's used to people, and if you've spent any time looking at wildlife, you know that wildlife that are used to people in vehicles or used to people in a certain distance from you are not bothered by your presence. And of course, that's one of the keys to living in balance with wildlife, is that they can tolerate humans. We have to understand their behavior, and they have to have a chance to coexist with us. Of course, what is causing a problem for this jaguar, or what is happening for jaguars, as for many species, is humans are the dominant species. Now, if you're a family and you live in Guyana and your little boy is sitting outside playing with a tortoise, which he also found in took out of the forest, and that jaguar's around, potentially hunting your cows and potentially your child, you're going to protect your children. So the basic conflict that we have between people and wildlife all over the world, it's really the same. We control the resources. We need what we need to house ourselves, have our food, take care of our families, and big cats like the jaguar are a big threat. And you can't really fault folks who are living really in any setting, but just to stay with the jaguar example, this is again in Guyana, very simple lifestyle here. People have 1 or 2 horses, they have a few cows, they have some chickens, and that jaguar potentially is going to consume their cash, what they have to earn money or to eat. Cows in this setting are a ranch. There aren't that many fences. People don't have that much money to put up a fence. The grass is really poor. The cows have to move far in order to have enough food. But that's definitely jaguar food, especially a calf that's born. So why, again, are the jaguars in trouble? So thinking about all animals, there's basically 5 drivers of extinction right now. And we are somewhere between 1,000 and 10,000 times above the baseline rate of extinction ever. So humans are causing a mass extinction of species. And you can categorize those reasons into sort of 5 buckets. One of them is farming and agriculture and development of habitat. And that would be the second one, which would be habitat loss. A third one is hunting. So we have hunted out the jaguar's capybara. It's hard to find a capybara in much of South America now. Apparently they've become a favorite pet, so now they're going to come up in the pet industry. So all you emerging zoo and wildlife vets, get ready to take care of capybaras. I haven't taken that care of that many. They're probably not easy because rabbits are tough to fix, so capybara are probably tough. So hunting, fishing is also a driver of extinction, not only of the animal that we're hunting or fishing, but the animals that eat those animals. So jaguars are in trouble because if they can't find a capybara, they are fishers. We also don't like to see jaguar when we're hunting. So again, it doesn't matter what species we're talking about. Agriculture, habitat loss, hunting, fishing, and then actually the global trade. So when I walked in and saw that jaguar skull, this is years ago, I wasn't surprised because I knew that jaguar had killed plenty of people's cows. Jaguar learns that the cow is easy food, they're going to come and get the chickens. And once they learn the chickens are easy food, they're going to come for a little kid. That's known. So farmers kill these animals. What are they going to do with the pelt? Hang it to dry it and sort of, okay, I killed a jaguar? No, they're ultimately going to sell this. You probably all know that trade in pelts used to be legal, and we wiped out a lot of amazing species, almost to extinction, everything from otter species to all the cats. We now have laws against this, but it still happens. So the illegal wildlife trade, just the trade in general, is a big driver of extinction. This is a cat where supposedly its parents killed cows, so they took the cubs in because they said the cows are, the parents are jaguar, are cow killers, so they killed the jaguar, took the cubs, and basically sold this cub to a zoo or 2 or 3 with the idea, well, these are problem jaguars, they know how to kill cows, and we'll take them out of the wild and put their genetics into the zoo world so we can improve our zoo genetics. So that's another drag on animals that are left in the wild. It happens in all zoos, all aquaria. You know, we're trying to save animals in captivity, keep them genetically healthy, but we don't have them coming in from the wild because that's against the law and against how we think we should be managing them. But then ultimately, we get these animals in through the back door, through the illegal wildlife trade. She has a very flimsy little piece of rope because she was a little cub when she was first tied up with a piece of leather. Then they couldn't get close to her to put a stronger collar on. So about a week after I took this photo, she busted that collar and nearly killed a little kid, about the age of the one that you saw. Got a new big piece of rope put around her neck. 2 months later, broke loose, tried to kill the same little kid, and then was shot. So we didn't do such a good job for that jaguar. Beautiful cat. So another big driver of climate change then is resource extraction. This is mining. But it doesn't matter what we're talking. Again, humans are the dominant species. We want these things, and we are making it really difficult for a lot of animals to survive. So here's some forests that you would have a jaguar in. This is mining. This is gold mining and bauxite mining. Bauxite's a big product in Guyana. This is also an amazing ecosystem. It's not very developed because it's a tough place for people. It's a wetland. It's a flooded wetland a lot of the time. This is the Rupununi savannas of southwestern Guyana. It's also got a very, very harsh dry season. It's a tough place for a horse. This is actually a domestic horse. But climate change, which is the other big bucket of extinction drivers, is really changing the nature of everything everywhere around the world, including the phenology, the timing of when plants flower and when animals eat those plants. So there are also pressures on the jaguar and all the other species, humans included, to adapt to these changes. And of course, we know that evolution is change over time in response to environmental conditions changing. But the change that things are happening now is so rapid that it's basically a huge experiment. What animals can adapt, what plants can adapt to these changes, and what's going to happen. I didn't mention invasive species and introduced species. That's kind of part of the whole global trade as a pressure. So what can we do about this? Well, we can know what we have. We can, in the case of the jaguar, camera traps are a great way to see where they're going and what they're doing. So here's another very well-fed jaguar, and she just ate a cow. We know that from another camera trap image. But knowing where these animals are, where are they moving, if we're going to protect them, we need to know about them. We need to use scientific data to say this is how many jaguar a given area can support, this is where they're moving, this is their likely behavior. It's not a surprise to know that if this jaguar runs out of cows on the edge of his habitat or her habitat, that she's going to go find something to eat where there are people. So we can predict the problems. We can predict the death of this jaguar pretty easily. We can also look for where his food is. So we can use camera traps to find the capybara. This is like my only camera trap photo of a capybara. Again, they're just cool animals. And they are coming back in some areas. So we can make decisions. We can say, we're going to protect capybaras so that we can have jaguars, so that our jaguar are not eating people's cows. So, kind of coming to the whole big picture, the health of everything is connected, right? So if we want to be healthy and we want to be able to be hunting or farming, we have to think about what the ecosystem can sustain. If we want to add into that, we want to have jaguars around, we have to pay for that. We have to pay for enough habitat to support enough species so that we can have that biodiverse world. We know how to do this. We know how to protect forests. You all can imagine, just think, some nonprofit you've helped support or you've worked with, we know how to protect animal habitats. And this is a little bit of a tough photo, it's not quite as dark in here, but in the case of the jaguar, these cats will move in these bushy areas. So they're a species that does very well in a corridor situation. You've probably heard of corridors. If we connect habitats, wildlife can do very well. And jaguars are a success story. We have all kinds of great examples of jaguars doing well from South America, Central America, even possibly in southern United States. So we can actually take care of the jaguar. We can live alongside the jaguar, but it's not free, right? We have to want to do this. We have to support conservation. And I tell people all the time, it's not that we don't know how to save species. We're just not doing enough of it. And why is that? Why is that where, let's say we need to spend $500 billion a year. That's a guess of a number, but let's say $500 billion a year would fund every project out there that you can imagine. You know, right now we might spend 50 billion, maybe 100 billion, the whole world. If you think about the amount of money we spend on wars and other things, you know, we actually as a world can afford to fund our conservation programs, but we are not doing enough of it. And that's the question that I ask myself all the time. How are we going to get more of us to support those great programs, whether you're actually actively part of the program or you're supporting it with funding or volunteering or educating people that this program is important. With the case of the jaguar, if we put the cows, if we funded putting the cows in a decent corral, that would solve a lot of problems. That's not a very expensive thing to do for us to help a community in Guyana. It's a very expensive thing for those folks to do. And if you gave them the cash to do it, they would spend that cash on something else, sending their kids to school, right? So the big problem with conservation is it has to have a holistic approach. It's not just about the animal, it's about people and their relationship with animals, and how are we going to strike a balance? And the way you would protect the jaguar in this part of Guyana is a little different than the way you would protect it in another part of Guyana or in another part of South America. And that's, I think, where conservation gets tricky, is it's not simple, it's not cookie cutter, it's layered and it's specific. But that's also where I think it gets really fun, and it can be really, really interesting if we can bring people into the story and let them pull it apart and get interested. We have to educate kids. This is a really fun day. It's kind of hard for you to see, but they all had to do little masks. So they drew a jaguar mask, or that's an otter, I think. There's a jaguar over here. You know, it's really easy to get little kids and excited about animals, but the little kids aren't making the choices. You know, it's their parents trying to protect them. So I think sometimes our conservation programs don't connect the dots enough. It's really, really not easy to do. And it's not because, again, we don't know how to do it. It's because we don't have enough funding to put all those bits together and enough people. So look, going back to the Rupununi and to Guyana, you know, the jaguar in this whole big habitat, you know, the jaguar is moving in the bushy area. But what's in here? What's in here used to be deer, used to be giant anteaters, used to be all kinds of smaller prey for that cat. So again, it isn't just protect the jaguar. We've got to look at the whole picture. So now you've listened to me for quite a few minutes here. Now I'm going to show you a piece of artwork that if you look at it for a minute, you probably can get the whole story, most of the whole story about what I just talked to you by looking at this sculpture. It's paper mache. It's life size. I'll show you another view of it. And maybe coming back to this view for a minute, can you see that this artist, this is actually like an anatomically correct slice through a jaguar. She's got the spine and the muscles. So, you know, she's wanting you to think about, you know, this animal as a commodity, this animal as something of beauty, this animal that is something that we want to help. It's a little bit scary looking. And what about this forest? It's disconnected, but we could connect it. So for me, the information and emotion that is in this artwork is where I think we have the opportunity to add to what's going on in conservation. My role is to help this artist learn all about jaguar corridors and muddle through a scientific paper that she might never ever have found, that she might not have thought she would even want to read. So I also think part of this, I like this piece because I talk a lot about reconnecting art and science. All of us who are in science were artists, and all of us who are artists were scientists. Art and science are basically observing the natural world around you and trying to make a sense of it. And that's, of course, what Darwin and Leonardo da Vinci, that's what our early naturalists were, artists and scientists together. And I think it's time to bring those back and do more of it. So I title this talk, Art Can Save a Panda, because I think we have to open up the participation in conservation. But if you think about a lot of wildlife art that you might have seen, a lot of it is, it's beautiful, but it isn't necessarily informing you about what's going on. And or you don't always have the sense that the artist would have known, okay, how many, what is really going on with the jaguar? And I think we have not connected as well our scientific community and our artistic or creative community. And I'm only giving you visual art examples because I ended up teaching visual artists, but performance art, music, it's all there. And it's, the more you look, poetry, the more you will see. The work is out there. It's about connecting it. This assignment was, how do you depict extinction? How do you show that something's going away and that if we did something, maybe it wouldn't go away? And I think this is brilliant. And this is just a homework assignment that he did overnight, right? So the talent of the artists that I work with is also very inspiring for me. Rhode Island School of Design is one of the best in the world. And I'm really trying to get the artists to first learn the science, pick the science or the animal that interests them, and then practice making that science visual. Because again, art and science are both visual. Art and science are both creative. They're both professions where you take in information, you make an assessment, you make a plan, you try it, and if it doesn't work, you refine it and you do it again. That's true whether you're in research or whether you're being a clinical vet or whether you're a painter. I have a whole series of extinction billboards. Like, how do we get people to understand we're in a mass extinction? We are in a mass extinction of species. My patients are going away. So I'm one of 200 board-certified zoological medicine veterinarians. So my profession is endangered. Like, what's the point of me treating the last rhino or the last giant panda? And I've done that, or the last mountain gorilla. So we don't need to be treating the last animals. We can do this. We just need more people involved. So the idea of this billboard was that the paint, as it rained, like each time it rained, the paintings of the animals would start to kind of peel off. And that, so it would be like an active thing. Great idea. This piece, the challenge was, how do you depict this human-animal interaction? How do you get at the idea that, that we are central and integral to biodiversity, and that our bits and pieces, our hangers, our paper clips are in there with the birds and the snakes. And it's not good or bad, it just is. And so I think not fighting it, not fighting the fact that we have, not saying it's bad. Humans are just dominant. That doesn't mean we're bad, but actually we could be really good if we said we want to have all these animals around. This piece is getting at the idea of ecosystem services, which you may or may not know that term, but this whole idea that we can value our ecosystems, we can put a number on the value. I like this because an artist that's really got this going knows how to use visual metaphors. So she knows we're all going to respond to the building blocks. We got to know building blocks. And she knows we're going to respond to the fish hook, right? So we fish hook a fish out of there, that building block thing is going to tumble. So it's a really smart way of getting this idea of, everything is interrelated. Everything relies on something. And this example is based on the salt marsh. I take students out to the local salt marsh, which if you've ever gone to a salt marsh, it's not the most biodiverse looking, interesting place if you do what most of us do, which is walk through it really quickly once in a while looking at our phone. But if you go slowly and stop and you see the crabs and you see the little flowering plants and you see what's going on and you smell the air and you slow down, you start to get the idea of an ecosystem service role. I think that also this topic, animals are in trouble, the corals are going away. 50% of all of our corals are going to be gone before you're all 50 of you who are students. So that is reality. But some corals will do okay because we know that the warmer ocean is actually favoring some corals. We actually know how to reseed corals with algae that can deal with climate change. We also know how to grow corals. So I think to make the story, to depict it in a way that is true but not necessarily all doom and gloom, I think this piece does that. Even this one, for like a kid's book about the dinosaurs going away. I like this piece because it forces me to talk about this idea that we are in a 6 mass extinction. And in every prior mass extinction, of which we've had 5, the dominant species went away. So extinction is a normal outcome of evolutionary processes. 80% of extinction is background, happens, maybe that northern white rhino that's gone, that species, maybe that was a normal extinction. But 20% of the time we have mass extinctions where most of the species go away, including the dominant species. So what happened to the dinosaurs? They were dominant. We are dominant. Why is it that we think we will still be here if we cause a mass extinction a good 800,000 years earlier than our own species should go away? Okay, these are real animals. They don't look real. They are the cutest things. Pandas, they are cute, they feel cute, they behave cute. We want to save cute things. That's fine. We should, and we should embrace that. And yeah, they're just but some animals lend themselves better to this idea that we want them around. And this is, of course, the icon of conservation. I will never get tired of hanging out with pandas or help, who could? However, there are 1.8 million named animal species on Earth, and they all need our help. How do you get excited about a dung beetle? I mean, another favorite species of mine. Yeah. 500,000 of those named species happen to be beetles, by the way. So if you're faced with a species, someone says, "What species is this?" and you don't know, you can just guess beetle, because one in 10 animals is a beetle. Anyway, so dung beetles doing this ecosystem service, right? So here's a fun way, like a take on the Little Prince, the dung prince. Again, just like homework assignment, play around with this. How can you quickly get someone there? Okay, smart. This artist, Alex actually spent an internship at Foster Parrots. You're gonna, if you hear from Danica when she comes to talk. So we have trying to get a RISD artist spending some time at Foster Parrots for inspiration. So what about frogs? Frogs are another species leading the way in the mass extinction. How do you, frogs are cool, but if you've never seen one of these frogs, it's not all that meaningful for you. And that's just something that I struggle with. I've held all of these animals in my hands. They've been my patients. They've been my responsibility. If I don't know how to fix that frog and it dies, it's my fault. So I take that very seriously, but that's not at most people's life experience with frogs. So here's a more fun way to play with frogs. So this is an artist. So her assignment was to do some kind of diagrammatic representation of a frog. And this is a collage, and it's brilliant. There's like all this writing that's about frogs need water to reproduce, and tadpoles do this, and frogs have this interesting skin, and there's only so many species of frog, and so that's all in this little notes. And then this is like sparkly stuff, and then she did a collage tongue, and her actual book for this course was every page was a huge page, and each one was just this whole collage animal exploration. And as she said to me, it was a wonderful chance to, dive in deeper than she would normally have done. And I think that's when I have an artist say to me that they dove deeper in, they learned more science, they read a scientific article, they even talked to a scientist about their project. That for me that's a step, and that's really where my focus is inspiring the artist and giving the artist a chance to get to that level, because let's put it this way. Most of us who work in science have a job. We have a place that we go to work, or a field place that we study, or animals that we care for. Most artists don't actually have an easy way to get there. So, giving them a way to get there is step one. But if they're not informed and they're not literate about the issues, then they're not going to get very far in terms of truly collaborating with their hosts, wherever they happen to go. So bees. So we all know bees are in trouble. Maybe bees, the pollinators, the crash of the pollinators is a little bit of an old story. Maybe we don't want to hear that anymore. So sometimes stories become popular in the news, and then we aren't really thinking about the issue. So here's an artist doing pattern work, and she's a big bee fan, but where do you want to see bees? On your tea towels, right? Or on your party napkins? Lots of different ideas. Okay, obviously there are two species in this photo. Everybody know what the two species are? African lion and pangolin. And why am I showing you a pangolin? Because it's the most endangered animal on Earth right now because of the wildlife trade. So people are consuming the pangolin because of their meat and because of their scales, and because they're rare. So what's happening to a lot of animals is the more rare they become, going back to the wildlife trade as a driver of extinction, the more valuable they are, not even to consume, just to put in a vault. So I'll show you we had a whole show, I sponsored a whole show on the wildlife trade, my nonprofit, which is called Creature Conserve, 2 years ago. And that work is still circulating. This is a piece from that show. So does anybody know the significance of moving object as a title for this piece? Sorry, this is the artist Angela who did that piece. Moving object, the characters for animal in Chinese mean moving object. And she wanted to help sort of bridge that gap, but we all have different attitudes toward animals. For some of us, they are sentient beings and our friends and our companions. For others, they are commodities. And that, again, that's human nature. So this is Angela and Kiana on one of my study trips. I have now a trip where I take artists both to Guyana, where some of those first slides were from, and to South Africa as part of this way of bringing artists deeper into conservation so they can see what's happening. Here is Clay, who's actually an architect student. He's learning how to set a camera trap. And so these 2 courses I have going now, the whole idea is to be away long enough so that we're not tourists. We kind of become more visitors in a country, get to know the local people and get to know their wildlife and what's happening. So he's being helped here by a couple of my Amerindian friends in Guyana who are really good at camera traps, and Clay is learning. Here we are hanging out with some kids in the school, talking to them about otters and jaguars, trying to get a feel for what's their perspective. Here is just a sketchbook page, which would be nice if sketchbooks would look like this. So when these artists travel with me, they have to do a field notebook. So remember, Darwin, Da Vinci, the early scientists, Humboldt, they all drew what they saw. And this is something, if as a scientist, those of you who are science students, if you haven't done any drawing, it's really worth practicing because it will help you learn everything from anatomy to even just remembering something that you saw. If you know anything about cashews, sorry, I'm not getting the pointer to work. This is the fruit of the cashew. You can't eat a cashew nut. It'll make you very sick, so it has to have this whole process of being boiled, put in the sun and then boiled. And so all the artists are always amazed how much it takes to make a cashew. And then we have fresh cashews at night with punch. It's delicious. Otters are one of the species I've worked a lot on, the giant river otter, the problem in Guyana, going back to that man, Alvin, who was fishing. People think that the otters are taking their fish, but it's the opposite. If you have otters on a river, it's because you have a healthy river and you have plenty of fish. And so this artist, Derek, learned about all the stories. Amerindians have sort of Aesop's fable-like stories about the stars, and he wanted to incorporate this idea of the stars and the stories and the fish and this baby otter and this idea of oneness, of what I would say is One Health. So I believe very strongly in One Health as a profession, but I think it's not something any one person can do. And I see my teaching at RISD as being someone who can bring the veterinary perspective and the conservation perspective as a way of inserting that into a world where nature and animals and society and social health and economic health and human health are all equal to animal health and their importance. And I think that's something that sometimes I feel out of place and sometimes I feel incredibly honored. Like when I bring people to see their first rhino. Now, this is in South Africa, and this was last year when we saw with this group of artists, I'm going again with them in June. When we saw this rhino, we had just been reminded by the guide to turn off your location settings on your cell phone. Because if you go back and post to Facebook, look, I saw a rhino, and your location setting says where you saw the rhino, the poachers are going to be there in a moment. So that's the world we live in. You can't just say where you saw an animal. The pangolin picture with the lion, it was the day after we left they saw the pangolin. I've yet to see a pangolin, but I hope that one day. So here's a piece on the rhino. You all know why the rhino's in trouble, for its horn. Same reason, the rhino horn ground up is worth more than cocaine, more than gold. It's simply in people's safes. The poachers want the rhinos rarer and rarer and rarer, and enough humans on Earth are playing into that game to certainly spell the end of the species if we don't do something. Now, the critique on this piece might be, it stopped a little quick. So you know about rhinos and their horn, but if you didn't, you might not entirely get that piece. So obviously with the artists, we're just giving them ideas, ways to practice making these problems visual, but I hope ultimately inspiring them to use this talent that they have in their work at some point in their careers. You'll see that some of the artists will tackle a tough problem with more of like a beautiful, positive approach. Like this is the idea that instead of keeping bears with holes in their sides so we can extract their bile, so we can treat people with liver disease, this plant called cactus makes the exact same chemical, but everybody wants bear bile. They don't think the plant-based chemical works as well, but the science says it does. So Eric, this painter, Eric, learned about this and he thought, this is I'm not going to paint a bear with a hole in its side. That's too upsetting. But I'm going to go to the positive side. And I really work on encouraging the students to learn about the solutions, because we all need to know there are solutions. And that's my whole point. There are solutions. To become a Maasai warrior, you used to have to kill a lion. Now the Maasai warrior protect their lions. And this is telling you the story of the Maasai warrior going from being a killer of lions to a protector of lions. First of all, you can't become a warrior if you have to kill a lion anymore because there aren't any lions to kill. So we need to save the lions in order to maintain the Maasai culture. And it's a completely successful program. Our newest exhibit, which is going to open this summer, and there's some cards on the table there, is on urban wildlife, learning to coexist. I'm encouraging artists, and this has gone out internationally, the call to artists, to partner up with a scientist who's an expert on an animal that intrigues you, that lives in your backyard. This morning there were 20 seagulls out my window. I live in Newport, and they were making a racket, and they were all eating, as I learned later when I took my terrier out, a rotten chunk of, I think it must have been blue cheese or something. There was like this huge thing of blue cheese on the ground, like little bits of it. And some of it was on the top of my car too. So, where do seagulls go at night? And where did they go? What did they eat before they were eating blue cheese? So I don't know. I got to go find a seagull scientist to find out. So the idea of the show is to encourage this closer look, and it'll be a juried show. And this is one artist whose work is really stunning. He's called the Raptor Guy. He lives in Providence. He's a graphic artist actually, but he's an amazing photographer. All of his work, these are all urban raptors. He will not ever share with you a photo of anything that's got nature behind it. It'll always show you the urban environment. Another piece for that show, this artist learned that in her part of the world, in Canada, the great blue heron is in trouble because of the bald eagle and because of loss of just regular old trees. So again, this next show, trying to, again, create a way for artists and scientists to meet up with each other. Yes, I hope an art piece comes out of it, but I also hope that there's a seed that's sown where the scientist realizes, wow, I could actually learn from working with an artist. And when I see what the artists make after I've lectured to them, and I see what they've found out, then I also learn. And I think communication is two-way. And if you're trying to encourage people to take better care of the planet, better care of animals and of each other, I think it's really important to see what you're broadcasting, how that's received, and what people do with that information. So as I said, I started a nonprofit, and it's really still very new. There's some buttons there, and we're just trying to find ways to put the artists out there. And if you're interested, my cards are also there. If you want to partner with a scientist, with an artist or a scientist, if you're an artist, then and you can't make that happen, then I love making those connections. And I just want to finish going back to the Jaguar story. Again, when I first saw a Jaguar pelt, the good news was I was like, wow, there must be a lot of Jaguars here for there to be all these pelts. And I thought, well, maybe that's not true. Maybe there's not that many Jaguars. how many jaguars can you have and have this many pelts hanging on a wall in a given area? That's actually a science question. Here's my friend Oswin. Here's our second group of students to go to Guyana. They had the idea of bringing plaster of Paris to make footprints of animals that we found on the drier areas. So in the wet season, the animals are everywhere. In the dry season, a lot of those areas they leave lots of great footprints. So we had this idea of making footprints. Oswin grew up with his family shooting every jaguar that they could shoot. Here's Oswin making his first jaguar footprint. And I have this footprint with me. And I bring it with me because it's my way of reconnecting with that jaguar that I don't think any of you will ever be able to do, but that I hope through the artwork of the students that I work with that we can get more people to feel that connection. So here's a picture of that. So thank you for listening, and I'll take some questions.
Conservation efforts there and the Maasai population, and that it had, I don't know where you were talking about this being a total success, but they were still sort of resentful of the fact that they couldn't kill lions, not just because it's like part of their culture, but because the lions threaten their livestock.
That's right. So the question is, where, just so everyone can hear the question, where is it that this is working with, say the lions to be a warrior? And it's only some little bits of Maasai culture, more so in Kenya than in Tanzania. But I have an artist and a conservation biologist right now who I met through going to a CITES meeting in Johannesburg who, well, the conservation biologist is Maasai, and he has a forest that he wants to protect for elephants. And he said to me, we want to protect it our way. And I want to work with an artist. So I paired him with an artist who's Kenyan, and where they have begun is going out to the communities and surveying the community, so that it doesn't come from the conservation community. You need to save the lions. And where they've come up with, and this may change, but they've come up with, the big conflict is over water, and people are afraid to go to the water because they think the elephants might come to the water. So the artist is doing all these drawings of water and people and elephants as a way to help talk about the issue, but I think ultimately they're also going to come up with some very cool design for watering trough or water areas. Maybe this is even some landscape design around how to create an area where both can coexist. So that's another piece of the work with Creature Conserve, is to try to create this art science collaboration so that it isn't like a top-down. But again, we have 8 billion people, and we have 30,000 lions left. When I started my career, there were 300,000 lions. So in 25 years, 90% of our lions are gone. So if we want to have these animals around, it is a combination of rules and some give and take. Other questions? Yeah, great question. Yeah.
I was wondering, for your classes, do you start off with like an informal discussion and then go into like more of an informative thing and then give an assignment, or how does that start?
So the question is, how are my classes structured? So over the years at RISD, I'm in my 8th year of teaching there, and my first class was called Human-Animal Interactions, and the biology of human-animal interactions. And the idea was, okay, what's a coral? Coral's an animal. What does it need? What's its basic biology? How does it interact with humans? What's the problem? Coral bleaching. What's the solution? So so I would give examples in class, and then everybody would read. And by the 5th or 6th week of the course, everyone is comfortable reading science articles and news articles and having little question and answer. And then I let the artists pick what they want to dive into. So I think, and I do that in evolutionary biology. So right now my students are picking artificial skin and genetically engineered glowing fish. And they're picking topics that interest them. And I think their science literacy comes with that piece. So I think I try to show them how I develop my literacy and try to get them interested in topics, and then let them dive into the topic on their own. The travel courses are very much, most of those artists have been in a science class. RISD has 8 of us, 8 scientists who teach we're part-time faculty. So there's a fair number of science. A lot of the faculty teach science studies, so there's a lot of background knowledge, and I think that a lot of the artists are already using science in their work, so they're coming to the science class. It's purely elective for them, so if they're in our classes, they really want to be there. But when the class is small, ideally, yeah, having them read a poem or having them look at an art piece and having them have a conversation around it, that's an ideal thing to add. I'll tell you, this year I taught anatomy, comparative anatomy for the first time, and I figured, well, I got to bring in animals. So we had a guinea pig, we had a parrot, we had each week I picked an animal whose body system was a great example of something different from human. And that was a really great thing with the artists because they, it was very hands-on. They could sketch from the live animal and kind of internalize all the stuff that was just on, on a 2D piece of paper. I'd say everyone who teaches science at the art school have tailored their science classes, but it takes a little experience to figure out how to do that. Another question.
So it sounds like a lot of the value and objectives that you were talking about with this work is very similar to what I hear zoos say for their goals, which is sort of like to educate and inspire. And I'm wondering if you or someone have made any efforts to kind of study the impacts of this work in a quantitative way, and if you can replace zoos with art one day, if that's
So that's a great question. It's a great question, but how do we know that we're making a difference? Zoos and museums struggle with that. Educators struggle with that. Even how do you know whether, even the theory around how art impacts you is actually not a very well worked out area of study, and it's partly because when you look at a piece that gets your attention, it's in our subconscious. It's something that you can't even put words to. I think that if I go back to we need 500 billion or whatever the number is more, well, I guess what I'm saying is we have the zoos, we have the aquaria, we have those efforts, but that's not enough because we are in a mass extinction of species, and those entities have been around a long time, and they're going to continue to do that work, but we need more. So what does that more look like? Who in here has an Apple phone or an Apple computer or a hybrid car, or they want to have their kitchen redone? Like the things that we want in our lives are designed for us by artists. If you're going to have a green LEED certified building, did those architects really know what it is to be in the rainforest? So I think part of what I want to do is help bridge more gaps and also break down this idea that if you're not a scientist, you can't get into art, and if you're not an artist, you can't get into science. I think that's partly because we have so much expertise that we all need to learn, but I think collaboration is the key, and so yeah, measuring it is tricky. I think that ultimately, one of the best measures is more at the level of, did you take an action? So, if I had 100 people in the room and, we could even do it in the last month, who has, recycled something or donated to an animal program or gone to a lecture. So I think the more we have, the more it's just part of our society to be informed. I think it applies to climate change and social justice and all the things. So I think it's just a question of more. Measuring it's a great question. I think the other interesting question to study is the process. Like what's really happening in that process of collaboration, and I'm really interested with that as well. Because the artist process of learning the science, and to the earlier question, how do you, what is it that they're choosing? What's motivating them to choose that topic to delve into? That's also really, really interesting. And for this next exhibit, we're trying to ask the artists to capture their process. And I think those artist diaries, if you will also be put out there to be consumed. And perhaps they may be more valuable to people than the actual end artwork. So it may be that the process is more powerful than the actual thing. I don't know how to measure it. If you know how, come in, let's do it. Last questions? Okay, well, thank you all for listening, and please email if you would like to talk more.